Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is Dave Opton speaking, and both Pat and I are delighted that you've taken some time from your day to join us on today's call. And we're going to get into your questions here in very short order. I just wanted to take a moment or two to kind of go over the format of what the meeting is all about and how it works, but particularly for those of you who are new to the call, and so that you kind of know what to expect and how things run. First and foremost, while we are online here, and you can see the background slide here that's got my contact information along with Pat's, this is not a webinar in the sense that most of us think of webinars these days. In other words, neither Pat nor I have remarks that we've prepared for this meeting. This is all as it happens live. It's not a presentation, it's a dialogue, very much set up that way on purpose. In other words, that both Pat and I are here simply as resources to interact with you as you have questions that you feel either one or both of us could comment on that would be of help to you. So that's really what this is about, and in that sense, you set the agenda. And the way that you do that is pretty straightforward as well. If you look over there to the right, you will see an area where it kind of works like a chat or whatever. You just chat in your questions and just type them up. I'll be able to see them. Don't worry about confidentiality at all. I'm the only one that will be looking at that. I certainly am not going to use your name at all. We'll just take the questions and try to address them, and as many of those as we can in the time that we have. So that's really what this is all about. We don't have a set agenda. You set the agenda. Between us, Pat and I have a fair amount of experience in the career management space. I'm certainly not going to sit here, at least speaking for myself, and tell you that I've got answers to a lot of this stuff, but I probably have an opinion, and am more than happy to share that if you feel it's helpful, and I certainly hope that it will be. When the program has concluded, you will get a chance to provide some feedback for us, and I certainly hope that you will take the time to do that. Our purpose here today is to try to provide value, and the only way we know whether that's really happening or not is if you take the time to let us know what you'd like to see more of, less of, or stay the same. So that's about it in terms of how things work. Now, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to hear Pat, and she's joined me on these calls before, you're in for a treat. Let me tell you just a little bit more about her background if you haven't had a chance to research it for yourself. Pat Romboletti has more than 25 years of sales and marketing management experience in family-owned, early-stage entrepreneurial and corporate environments, and more than, I'm going to say, Pat, probably 13 or 14 years now.
Exactly.
In the recruiting world. Prior to joining Sandhurst Group, where you can see she is now the managing partner for their Southeast, she had founded Sage Executive Search, where she brought revolutionary changes to the executive search industry. Her boutique firm was known for its personal, consultative, and high-touch level of service for her clients, and her practice focused primarily on family-owned, closely held businesses, life science, medical device clients, as well as technology clients. Prior to that, and earlier, she had included more than 15 years of sales and marketing leadership in family-owned businesses. She also was a graduate of the 2007 class of Leadership California, which is a network of accomplished women dedicated to advancing the leadership role that women play in impacting businesses, social, and public policy. She served as the Vice President and President-elect for the Foundation Fighting Blindness in LA, and was also a member of the California-based Family-Owned Business Roundtable. She moved on to Atlanta, where, as you can see, she is the managing partner there. And in addition to her many activities, civic activities there and so forth, she also serves as the membership chair for CEO NetWeavers in Atlanta, and I'm very happy to say she also facilitates ExecuNet's meetings in the Atlanta area as well. So any of you on the call who are in that area, you also have the opportunity to meet her in person if you'd like. But in any case, we have her today live on the phone. Welcome, Pat. Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. I always enjoy these calls so much.
Well, let's get right into it. And while people are still getting a chance to post their questions, and as I said, some may have come in a little bit late on the call, but if you've got questions, put them up there, and we'll get to as many as we can. But I thought, Pat, I would ask you, since we're coming up on June here, pretty close to about halfway through the year, and because I know you, the coaching that you do with folks, as well as obviously on the search side, I think maybe the callers might be interested in your perspective on the marketplace, kind of as you've seen it evolve from the beginning of the year, both maybe on coming as a search consultant, but also in terms of what that says for candidates as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think the first word that comes to mind to describe what's going on out there is that it really is a robust hiring market, and I don't think I've used that word in a few years. So it's exciting to be able to say that. And I would say my experience is, I do search on a national and actually international basis. So it's not just the commenting on the Southeast. It is just not even restricted to a particular industry. It's pretty much been across the board. A lot more senior level hiring, some optimistic expansion. Some things that people came into 2015. Well, let me back up. They came into 2014 with hiring objectives and didn't necessarily pull the trigger. They've come into 2015 with hiring in new positions, and they seem to be willingly and readily pulling the trigger. Atlanta is particularly robust because we have Mercedes is moving to the Atlanta area and opening their headquarters here, and they're going to be doing thousands of jobs. And so I've seen different corporations in Atlanta recently, and we have a lot of Fortune 500 headquarters here, commenting about hiring from anywhere from 500 to several thousand at a time. So all of that is good. I think from it's interesting from the coaching, talk about the coaching that I do with ExecuNet. This year, I would say in the last 9 months, all but maybe 2 of the candidates, and I do quite a bit, are currently employed and really just getting coaching so that they are ready and able to be available should they get a call or should they see an opportunity. So, not so many folks, as many folks in transition, people being smart about their career, and I think they're starting to listen to the bloggers and everybody who's saying, you should always be ready for at least talking about an opportunity. So, and I would say from my point of view as a recruiter, I do find that people are more readily willing to, at least just listen. And I always open the conversation with, this isn't any more than me presenting something and you getting to be comfortable with it, right? But good response from candidates, feeling more confident that they'd be willing to take a risk and make a move. And as you mentioned, I don't recruit for the Fortune 500. My practice area is mostly middle market companies or closely held family business. And I have a lot of folks from the larger companies who are really anxious to hear about what's going on in smaller companies because they do feel like they'll get a little bit more. I think there's 2 reasons. They'll feel like they'll get more opportunities, and they realize that being in a large corporation where it maybe represented tremendous stability a few years ago, that's not the case. Yeah.
I would say, that certainly squares up with what a lot of what we're hearing from members as well, Pat. So, although let me just ask a quick follow-up to that,
sure.
Particularly because of your practice area.
Yeah.
And that is in terms of, while the economy is certainly getting better, is it your observation still that vis-a-vis, let's say, the Fortune 500, that the jobs that are being created, I'm not talking now about specific industry segments, but just jobs in general, particularly at the executive level, is that growth coming from, beyond the Fortune 500?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, again, while I don't search in the Fortune 500 because I sit in the middle of a city with a lot of it around me, I see more optimism and more hiring in the Fortune 500, more attempting to hire. I mean, they're having a hard time getting people who want to go to them. I've been hearing that for years, and it's coming home to roost. And I think it's gonna be bigger as the millennials get older and just don't want that environment. But yes, for sure. I mean, the family business is expanding, middle market. You know, the truth is, especially for that middle market that I love, there's plenty of capital out there. There's been a lot of acquisition, and that's created you know, opportunity. So the flow of capital in that middle market is really helping those companies.
Yep, that would be. It was kind of my feeling as well. And here's kind of a question that's attached to that, because your comments about folks being employed versus someone who's in transition. What is your view? This caller wanted to know that what your view was of an executive in transition versus those who are employed as candidates for the opportunities that seem to be getting more prolific in this environment.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my view, and then I'm going to tell you what's the norm, and they are not the same. You know, you used the word revolutionary in my biography, and while this may seem not revolutionary to many, my view on this is, and that is, I tell my clients from the moment we launch the search that they're hiring me to find the best person, and that I will be bringing them candidates that are both currently employed or that are in transition, and they should be evaluated the same, because I'm only going to bring them people that I know are highly qualified to do the job. So I set the expectation up front, because I just believe that. I'm not the norm. I'm more the exception. I'm not the only one, don't get me wrong, but you will find, especially in the very large firms, the publicly traded larger firms, they tend to shy away from folks in transition for many reasons, which you can talk to them about. I'll let them comment, but they do. So I'm a very straightforward person, as you'll probably find on this call, and I always encourage the candidates that I coach to be as well. And when you do get a call and somebody, if you're in transition and they ask you about, you know, your status, et cetera, you want to ask them how they view it. Be very straightforward, or ask them how they believe their client will view it. And again, I think if it's you talking to someone directly, a hiring person, or me as a recruiter talking to the hiring person, I try to emphasize this is a quality person. Here's the circumstances around their being in transition, and I would ask you to consider them equally to anyone else. I can tell you that the prejudice at the employer level on that topic has changed dramatically since the recession, and the reason was, before the recession, they were very stubborn about that topic. During the recession, they started to see there were, so many people in transition that maybe 50% of the candidates were always in that status, and they started to see there were some great people in there. So they experienced something that changed their paradigm a little bit. So it's a little bit better now, and there's still some people that are just very close-minded about that topic. But in general, I think it's a little bit better.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I would, looking at it from, when we talk to members, obviously I talk to members every day and been doing this for a while, I absolutely would agree with you. The bias that exists around people in transition versus people who are employed, does it still exist? It absolutely still exists, just like there are biases around age or anything else, as we all know. But I also would agree with you that I think it has improved. I think the reasons that you suggested certainly are in play there, as well as something else that I've noticed in talking. The average age of the membership here is 53. That means we deal with a lot of people who not only obviously, like we all have, lived through this last recession, but the one before that. And the one before that, or the most serious one before that, was back in the late 80s and early 90s, where for the first time in a generation at least, executive management levels were really hit, and millions of people at that level lost their jobs. Now, so that experience has carried over into their careers, and many of those folks are, because they are now the clients, if you will, that Pat had referred to, are much more willing to entertain the notion of a candidate and whether or not that candidate is really the right fit for their particular opening, as opposed to being much more rigid about employed versus unemployed. I don't know if you would agree with that, Pat, but certainly I hear that from people as well.
I agree 100%, and it's why I sometimes coach candidates when they're doing search strategy is go online to look at the person that you're going to meet with. Go to their LinkedIn profile. It's probably the best way to find this particular piece of information.
Yeah.
But look and see if they've ever had a gap in their dates. If they have, it's going to be a much different conversation than if they have not. If they've been in the same chair for 18 years, it's probably not going to be as easy for them to be open-minded about that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I probably hear more on the age issue these days than I do employed versus unemployed, actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's a question. This caller wants to know, I have 13 years of experience, executive management experience in the IT world with companies such as American Express, First American, and Royal Bank. But I've now been consulting for 10 years. And now I want to return to an executive management position in a large organization. Could either one of you comment on how I can be viewed as still relevant? Pat, I'm sure you've dealt with clients who have been on the kind of the client side and then went on the consulting side and so forth. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and again, it's interesting. While the recession caused a lot of harm, some things were improved, and this topic has also been impacted. Before the recession, I really had to work hard to get a client to look seriously at somebody who had been consulting for a number of years. Now, sometimes I had candidates that had a very short stint in non-consulting roles and hadn't moved up into a leadership position, and then they went into consulting, and then they were mature and they wanted a leadership role back in industry. That's a challenge because what the employer is concerned about is you haven't really directly managed people. You've been an outsider directing people, but you haven't had a responsibility for a team that reported directly to you in operational roles. So that was of concern to them. And that's really the first thing that comes to their mind is if you're in consulting, you may have teams that diagonally report to you, dotted line, et cetera, but that whole having people in different functions within your team doesn't exist. So they worry about that capacity to actually lead people like that. But because, again, during the recession, many people took up consulting for 3 or 4 years because it lasted so long, and corporate America and hiring managers began to see a lot of people who had consulting in their background coming through the door, and they were fine with it because it started to be more normal, and they talked to those people and got to understand them. If you've been in a big consulting firm, there still is a concern that you don't get your hands dirty enough. That can be a problem. If you've been in a smaller or an independent consulting firm, they're more open-minded, but it's a much better view of that, and the fact that if you've had leadership positions prior to going into consulting, it's going to help you quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case, and I think a lot of it depends on kind of what's the pain point that the company is trying to solve is really key, and where that comes into play really has to do with on the candidate side is the efforts that you've made in terms of researching and understanding kind of what the issues are that may be in play here.
Yeah.
And so that as you network your way into the organization or however you get there, you're in a much better position to be addressing something that is specifically important to them. And believe you me, once you are on point of talking about things that are of concern to the hiring organization, whereas they may have had some concerns around, well, they haven't been on the corporate side for a while, that gets lessened in a real hurry when they start to see that you know what you're talking about, and more importantly, have some suggestions or ideas that might help them address that particular issue.
And I think you can also play that experience in your favor in a couple of ways. You can, people only hire people to solve a problem. So
Yeah.
you sell yourself as, I've been a problem solver, and people bring me in and they give me 90 days to solve the problem. So I'm used to going in, doing a quick triage, figuring out what's going on and coming up with solutions. That's
Yep.
what I do. So you can sell yourself as being somebody who's going to be able to get in the chair and hit the ground running. That's one thing. The other thing is, we now have, even in the mid-size and smaller companies, it's the nature of the generations in the workplace, we now have a very highly collaborative workplace. And you, as anybody who's been a consultant, has had to be a master of collaboration.
Yep.
And a master of getting, IT to talk with finance, to talk
Yep.
with this division. So again, think about what's present in the workforce, what skills it's always like, think about what you may think as something that's a problem. How could that be a really great solution? And I don't think enough people sell those two areas. Enough people who have been in consulting remind the hiring managers who have not been in consulting what they're bringing to the table that's unique.
Yeah, very well said, Pat. Let me take a pause for just a moment here to say to those folks who came in maybe a little bit later on the call that if you've got questions there where you would like Pat's thoughts or mine on a particular issue that's of interest to you, just go ahead and chat it into us, and we'll be more than happy to address it as best we can. Here's one, Pat, where this person says this. Says, I know the company I want to work for, and I know many key persons at that company, and they agree that I can deliver good things to them. However, they say that they can't help me to get a position for ethical reasons. Is there any secret to breaking that particular wall down? I know a lot of executive positions are not posted, so that sending my resume around certainly might be the best way to get a position there. But how do I get around the particular issue of folks saying, well, I really don't want to, I really can't do that much because I feel it's not ethical for me to do that?
That's interesting. That's a first for me here to say that, because many companies actually have incentive programs for their employees to bring people in. So yep. I suspect, I'm going to guess, I'm going to go out on a limb here and suspect that it's a fairly conservative industry, perhaps a highly regulated industry. And if either of those two factors are the case, then that could be the reason for that comment. I think that I would continue to build those relationships and work on getting them comfortable with the fact that you're not actually begging them to necessarily endorse you, but to simply facilitate an introduction. And maybe they think that you're asking for an endorsement, and maybe they would feel more comfortable if that wasn't the case. So that's another thing I can think of.
Yeah, it's I certainly would buy your analysis as well. I mean, it also could be, I mean, I hate to say it, but it could be, kind of a smokescreen for they don't want to do that because yep. they may not feel you're the right fit for that company or whatever. And the answer is I don't know. But mm-hmm. but if that's what they're saying, that's what they're saying, and you're going to have to develop some tactics and strategies to get around it. Some of which may very well be they're saying, okay, if they don't want to do that, and you know the company well, as you've said here in your comment, then I might try to communicate with or network my way into people that you don't yet know at that company, yeah. but where you might be able to present to them some of the knowledge that you have and some of the ideas that you have, as I said, commenting on the other question, in terms of the more you know about that organization and what issues they are facing, the better off you are in being able to have a conversation that's saying, this is part of the reason I follow you guys, and I may very well have some thoughts to address these particular situations, and then let nature take its course, so that if your name is being presented in some way from someone that you don't know well, they may certainly it's somewhere in the interviewing process for sure, it's going to come up either because you mention it or they mention it, saying, do you know anyone else here who might be able to tell us a little bit more about you or whatever. So it's going to come up one way or another, but it may make the people who right now are saying, I don't want to be the first one to do that, feeling more comfortable about saying, oh, you bet, I do know Pat, and I think she'd be great.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Let's see. Patricia, specifically for you, says, what are your thoughts on the case, or the ease, I should say, or difficulty of transitioning from one industry to another? So this is a little bit different than saying I've been a consultant and I want to go into a company, but rather I've been in, one industry segment, and now for whatever reason am trying to get into a different one.
Yeah, I'm so glad whoever asked that because I'm sure it comes up a lot. And here's what is most important to understand. It is possible to change industries. Again, if you look at people's backgrounds and profiles, you'll see that people have done that and done it successfully. There's several tricks to being able to do it and do it well. First of all, it's important to understand that seldom does a company hire a recruiter to go get somebody from a different industry unless they feel their industry has fallen way behind the curve in some way and they know another industry that's relevant and they want to get that knowledge. Most of the time, by the time when they pay a recruiter to go find somebody, they're absolutely trying to match their own existing profile. So their thinking is this: if I'm medical device and I'm willing to hire people from technology, that's easy for me to go over there and look and pick from there. But it's going to be difficult for me to call into my competitors, et cetera, to get the medical device talent, and I've got a smaller pool, so I'm going to hire a recruiter to do that work. So we seldom, in my 14 years of doing search, I have only once been asked to go outside of the industry. I've been able to talk clients into thinking more broadly, but they don't come to me with that order. So that means that if they're doing it, they're tending to do it as their own search, and so it's going to be an in-house project. Okay, so I think it's important to keep that in mind so that you don't spin your wheels trying to get a recruiter to pass the information, recruiter to be the nirvana for you. It's not likely to be. Dave has talked a lot about knowing about the company. So if you've targeted an industry, you want to have really good logic for the person that you talk to about why you've targeted the industry. You're going to have to teach them how you're going to bring something really great to the table because they won't have been used to talking to people outside of their industry. I had a diagnostics company, and I was able to get somebody who had never been in healthcare but had been in software, and they were implementing the first time ever quality software into their labs that they were going to be serving. And the only way I got them to meet with that person was to allow that person. They gave him a challenge of an assignment. Do a presentation about this topic, and he did it, and he nailed it. And they said, "Wow, he understands this already, right?" So he just proved that it wasn't rocket science. But you are going to have to take a lot of responsibility, and just know that for the most part, there is a little bit of reluctancy. Now, another thing I will tell you, and this is another way I teach LinkedIn, and I teach people to use it very differently. I always encourage, if you target a company and it's outside of your industry and you're targeting that company, and you go and look at the leadership, all the way down to maybe director level, vice president, director level in that company, and you see that everybody in that company is from that industry, the chances are slim that they're open-minded about it. But if you see people and look at people's backgrounds and they've come from multiple industries, even if it's only one other, then you've got a much better chance. Very
well said. And I would just buttress, Pat, what you're talking about by sharing the following. For many years, and we continue to do this, we survey the search world on a wide variety of issues. And one question that we have asked every single year of the search world is, what is it really that your clients are asking you to find? And what are the major criteria? And I will tell you that the three that came out, and they are far ahead of any other attribute that you might think of, were the following: industry-specific experience, functional expertise, and leadership.
Yeah.
And those three are so close together that you could put them in any order you want to. They might as well all be on the same line. So that's just simply to underscore what Pat said in terms of thinking that, the recruiting world is the way to go about that. I think the points that she made about, this has got to come from you as opposed to more of a third party is absolutely the case. And the other thing I would add to that is this, it goes something like this, and that is that even though an industry is different than the one you came out of, if you back away from it far enough, a business is a business. And the issues that businesses face are not all that different. They think they are. That's why they say they want somebody from that same industry segment, because we all think that, well, no business is as crazy as ours. But the fact of the matter is that it could be a sales issue, it could be a manufacturing process issue, or whatever. And it may very well be that you have addressed those kinds of issues, albeit in a different industry, and know a fair amount about them. If that's the pain point that you've discovered with your research, then having a conversation around the pain point might help you get around the issue of, okay, I may not have the industry-specific experience, but I sure as heck have solved a lot of logistics problems that aren't that different than what you are facing, and maybe that helps to serve to break down a barrier that might be there in the first instance. I don't mean to sit here and tell you that it's easy, because it's not, because there is a strong bias in that area, but people do it. And in my experience, about 20% of the time, give or take, they can make that kind of a change.
Right, and realize that they're trying to mitigate risk,
right,
and they're trying to make sure, in this era where things change so fast. I mean, a 5-year plan is history, right? So
right.
Now you have your 12 to 36 month plan if you're lucky. So what it means is things change rapidly. So when somebody's invests in hiring a senior person, they're trying to mitigate risk, but they're also trying to make sure that that person can hit the ground running, because the runway in terms of the competition and the changes that are constantly needed is very short these days. So,
yep.
So if you know that those are two main considerations, be prepared if you do get the chance to have the conversation to explain to them how you're going to mitigate the risk and how you're going to be able to hit the ground running.
Perfectly said. Let's see. This gentleman wants us to talk a little bit more about age bias for senior hires. I'll just jump in and say, yeah, I mentioned earlier in the call that I certainly hear more on that subject than I do the idea of whether somebody's in or out of transition. And that is likely because, as I said, the average age here is 53. I guess the short story I would say is this. The bias against age is certainly alive and well. There are lots of other biases, as I said earlier, we know this. My feeling about it is this. I think that when it comes to a bias, be it age or otherwise, that life generally operates on a spectrum. At one end of that spectrum are people whose minds you are never going to change. On the other end of that spectrum are people whose minds you don't have to worry about changing. The rest of us are probably somewhere in the middle, which to me suggests that even though I may have a bias, acquired, how acquired is irrelevant, but I may have it, I'm willing to listen. I can be influenced, and that's I think what I would go about trying to do. We have a lot of content, by the way, on this subject on the site. If you use the search engine on the site and just type in age discrimination or age bias, you'll find a lot of content there with a lot of advice and counsel on some of the tactics and strategies that one can use if you're concerned that might be an issue, and indeed as it probably will be in some instances. But so it's a long way of saying, is it there? Yes. Is it insurmountable? The answer is no. Is it going to take somebody who's in their 50s probably longer to make a change than someone who's in their 30s? The answer is probably yes, but not impossible. Pat, your thoughts?
Yeah, a couple things. I echo everything that Dave said. I'm going to give some real world advice. I mentioned and repeat, I work in the middle market and closely held businesses, and many of those are private equity backed, not all, but many, and of course family owned or closely held, right? Those size companies and those non-publicly traded companies that are either closely held or PE backed are much, much more receptive to over 50 senior executives. Yep. They
Very
appreciate
true.
the silver on the private equity are petrified of a too young executive.
Exactly.
They usually have a pretty short runway. They want somebody to come in and turn the company around and get it ready for whatever their next exit is going to be. So they're not worried whether you're going to be there for 10 or 15 years. And they know that there's nothing they like better than to know it's not your first rodeo. So targeting that size company versus the Fortune 500, where I personally find more of the prejudice and discrimination and maybe more ways to disguise it, that has certainly been the case. Secondly, I want to say that when I present a slate of candidates, and I often, because I do work in that market many, many times, my entire slate is over 55, and I don't hesitate. I had one slate, I recall not too long ago, for a CFO role, and they were all in their early 60s. What I look for and what they're really looking for on the other side of the desk is they're looking for do you have a good level of energy? So, by the way, I've also had 35 and 40-year-olds sit across from me and not want to present them because they didn't have any sense of energy, which gives a sense of urgency, right? So what they're really saying is, does this person have the energy that's needed to do this job? And the second thing that they're really concerned about is, are they relevant in terms of technology? So what they're going to have an employee base of millennials and Gen Xers that have been raised on the internet. So they need to know that that leadership person understands the perspective that they have never been without that, and that they are going to be very demanding about the technology foundation of the company, and they can't have someone who has never sent their own email, and there are folks out there, unfortunately, that's the case. So I always tell people, don't go, if you can go into an interview, if you're over 50 and you can go into an interview with an iPad versus a yellow line paper, you've already started to demonstrate something that is important to demonstrate, right? So it's very, very sorry. I have a phone ringing, and I'm sorry for the. So it's really important to be up and running on your technology and be relevant. And if you aren't, get somebody to help you with that. But demonstrate that you are relevant in that area, and it will go a long way to helping you.
Yep, very, very well said, Pat, and certainly true, and on every level for sure. Next thought here says, I'm an experienced executive with over 30 years of experience. I've been told by various individuals, resume writers, recruiters, etc., that I should only show the last 15 years of experience on my resume. This, however, does not show the depth of experience that I have, though it makes me look less experienced and thus younger. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a topic that kind of drives me nuts. So let me back up and say, whatever you decide to do in your resume, please make sure that your ExecuNet profile and your LinkedIn profile concur. Because when people see a resume that has things cut off and it's on other profiles, they start to wonder what's going on. So that's kind of a little off topic, but that's important. I think that if you look back and it's more than 15 years, and I'll give you a simple example. If you worked in a Big Four accounting firm, and it was early in your career, and now you're going for a CFO role, you don't want to cut that off. That's a very important piece of the puzzle. Many times when I've done CFO searches, the client has said they must have Big Four experience, right? So, if it's a summer job, or if you were doing something completely separate from where you went in your career, but I don't believe in these hard and fast black and white rules around resumes. You want to sit back and look at your earlier experience, and if it is relevant, keep it on your resume. You might reduce it, so in your more current and recent work, you're going to have more examples of accomplishments and more specifics. And in your older work, it may be just the name of the company, the size, and your title, and a little bit about the scope of what you had. But if it's relevant, you want to keep it on. That kind of begs the question, it leads right into the question that I get very often, which is, well, how long should the resume be? And I cannot emphasize enough, it is never about the length of a resume. It is always about the quality of the content. I have 14 years been presenting resumes to clients, and I've never once had them push back about the length of a resume. I have had them say afterwards, like, I met with this person, and boy, he was so much better in person than what his resume presented. Even though I've given them like a 7 or 8 page summary of the discussion, they still correlate what they saw and what they heard versus the too simplistic copy of the resume. So, you know, having a great resume is about having great content and having the resume tell your story uniquely. And that all kind of fits into this, your question. If it's an important part of your story, do not omit it.
Yeah, this is a topic that comes up a fair amount, and I guess my quick answer would be, when it comes to resumes, and as Pat has already alluded to, you're dealing in a very subjective world here. And I certainly would agree that it's the content that really makes the difference. It's also, by the way, one of the reasons why I'm a very strong advocate of having a professional do the resume rather than myself as a candidate agonizing over how to do it. I mean, all the experience you've had is important to you. It may or may not be important to somebody else. So I think a professional doing it makes all kinds of sense. And in terms of it, and that includes having somebody who does this every day for a living collaborate with you on what experience to emphasize, how much of it to show, how far back does it go, and how do you present that information. If you're worried about the age thing on resumes, I come from the school that says I would not worry about it that much, particularly if you had to engage a professional to do it with you, because if somebody has really got it in for on the age thing, they will be able to figure that out no matter what you do. You know, you get this counsel that says, well, leave your college graduation date off of there because it's a red flag. I mean, I'm just not of that school. You know, it's not about hiding things. It's about helping people understand what you bring to a situation. How you present it is important and can play a role. So I'm not sitting there saying wave a big red flag. I'm just saying it's good to have counsel on how to do that. And by the way, while we're on this subject here for a minute, let me just go into the site for a second, because there may be a number of you on the call who are either new to this membership or haven't looked at your profile recently. And so take a look here. When you open up the site, you go over to the icon that has your name and presumably your picture there, and when you mouse over that, there is a drop-down menu. This is how you navigate around and can control things on this site, and that includes your profile. I clicked on my account, and there are just 3 areas here for sure that you should look at carefully. One, as I said before, we're talking about resumes. Part of your membership, whether you're a basic member here or a platinum member, you can get a resume review. It is complimentary. If you haven't taken advantage of it, this is where you can go ahead and schedule it. Your profile, as Pat mentioned, it absolutely needs to correlate. And if you haven't looked at it here or you haven't completed it here, I certainly would do that. It's enormously important. It's the first place that a recruiter comes. It's the first place where other members come from a networking perspective. And certainly you've got the opportunity here to explore. You see where it says member search under network. That's a very LinkedIn-like search engine where you can reach out to other members in ExecuNet, and maybe you can help each other. And that includes, by the way, I mean, here's just a sample, but that includes down here where later on in the profile area, down towards the bottom, there's an area called More About Me. A lot of people miss it because it is toward the bottom, but as you can see here, there are a series of statements which, if you take the time to answer them, gives whoever is looking at your profile a sense of you as a person not just Dave Opton, who's spent 20 years doing A, B, or C, but rather tells you more about him from a philosophy point of view, maybe a little bit on personality. And I think most of us on this call have been on the hiring side of this to know that it's usually not about an experience factor. Does someone bring the right amount of experience to what it is I'm trying to fix? I want to know more than anything else, are they going to fit in with the group that we have here and the culture of this organization? Taking the time to go through this will help people from a screening perspective. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, I would suggest that you do that as well.
Absolutely. You know, Dave, one more thing about, I want to mention something that I heard recently and maybe give good hope to the folks who are concerned about the age factor. As I've said for a number of years, I've lectured on multi-generations in the workplace, and you know, we know if you listen to any report, they tell you how many boomers are leaving the workplace now and fleeing the workplace, and so there's a vacuum being created, right? But on NPR a few weeks ago, there was a show, and they have proven, or they have statistics that say by the year 2020, so we're only 5 years away, 50% of the workforce in the United States will be self-employed. Now, you know, ExecuNet's a little bit ahead of the curve because you, I know, offer folks that participate in your site talk about franchising. So there's this huge movement that boomers are starting franchises and going into business with their millennial children, so that's phenomenon is happening. But the point is, if 50% by 2020, so the exodus has started, are going to be self-employed, that's a huge impact to corporate America, and they are going to have to be more open-minded about some things that they have drawn stark lines in the sand about. Yeah,
absolutely true. We made Pat and I were talking a little bit about the age thing and where some silver hair might be more welcome in terms of smaller companies, and also the private equity world. We've got a couple of sort of follow-on questions to that, Pat. One person wanted to know if you had any advice on how to find solid, reputable PE or family businesses in different regions. And the corollary to that was also how do you tap into the private equity middle market when you're not in it?
Yeah. Once you break, so here's the good news. It's a little bit hard to get into, but as you probably have learned, once you break into it, they come back to you over and over again. So that's the good news. One of the best organizations, because here's the thing, going directly to a PE firm if they do not know you is going to be a very long, hard road. They like proven racehorses, again, because they have such a short window. But they don't always have the right racehorse in the stable. So what do they do when they want to find somebody? They use their network. They use their deal attorneys. They use their deal accountants. They use their investment bankers. They use the entire food chain of trusted advisors around them that they work with over and over again every time they're doing a deal. And they usually have a stable of a few firms that they work with. So how do you find them? The very best group and they're global, and they certainly are in every major city, and in cities like New York, I think they have 3 or 4 chapters, is the Association for Corporate Growth, or acg.org. Headquartered in Chicago, but they're everywhere. I'm a very active member of that organization in Atlanta. They're very robust in every city that they're in. And within that, they have monthly meetings. They usually have summer outings. They have lots and lots of events. They most of them have something that's called a Capital Connection. Let me explain. Atlanta has one every February. It's usually end of January, early February, and there's 1,100 attendees in that meeting, and probably more than half are private equity firms that come in to network and to meet with others. And I can tell you that I have had candidates in town be sure that they get to that event, and they have made great connections. So it's kind of the place to meet for that private equity middle market. So you want to be, always coach on having a very expanded network. And you know, if you're a financial person, be sure that you have a good, strong network in the accounting world, because the first person that a firm calls when they need a financial person in-house is typically their accounting firm. And lawyers also get the call of who do you know. So this is really, getting into that niche is really about networking. Not that everything isn't, but in that niche in particular it is, and so you want to be sure that you tap into that, and ACG is the you're going to get more people in one place at one time with ACG than with any other organization.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. That's very good counsel. I certainly, Association for Corporate Growth is very well known, and as you pointed out, is certainly a good place to start. But I think the macro part of it is, and boy, it's definitely in the PE world is a networking kind of a play, and so that means you need to hang out where they hang out, whether it's online or off, and certainly ACG is a terrific place to start. Mm-hmm. This person wants to know, say, Pat, do your clients want to see a traditional resume first, and how do they feel about photographs?
You know, in this country, like I've done European searches in Germany, and in Europe, it's very common. Everybody has their photo on their resume. That is not the case here. As a matter of fact, it's almost like it's so not the norm that it's not necessarily a winning formula, right? I'm not saying that everybody doesn't like it, but it's safer not to have that, okay? On U.S., if you're applying for a job outside of the United States, you want to be sure to have it on, so there's a little bit of cultural difference. I think, I'm sorry, the two parts of the question, I'm not sure, I want to make sure I answer the first part. It was having
they also wanted to know whether or not it was a traditional resume. Mm-hmm. Is that the preferred submission?
Well, yes. With a retained firm, any retained firm is going to present your resume and an extensive written summary of the discussions that have been held. I do that, and I will tell you that I always present a dossier. So here's, the resume and the pages underneath, and here it is in a nice presentation. And the first thing they always go to is the resume. And then I try to get them to highlight, so they still live and die by the resume. It's the tool that they're used to. I know that there's a lot of video, people trying to sell video resumes, etc. I just don't think I think they'd be great, but the hiring world isn't quite ready for that yet. In general, maybe some of the new age companies, newer, what I call non-legacy companies, like technology companies of the last 20 years might be more receptive to that. But I find by and large they're still looking for a traditional resume. If you have an augmenting piece, a kind of a marketing piece to go along with it, and I think it's relevant, then I include that. I do not include cover letters, and I think that's pretty much the norm in recruiting. Our client is expecting us to present an unbiased look at these candidates, and cover letters tend to be pretty biased about how they're perfectly well suited for the job, and it's my job to prove that, not the cover letter.
Right, you are. And it's funny to me because certainly you've got traditionally here and culturally here, it's kind of a not great form to be putting a photograph on a resume, but on the other side of it, on whether it's LinkedIn or here, if you don't have a picture, it kind of delivers a message that's saying, what? You don't know how to put a picture online? Yeah. So you're just know where it's appropriate to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, people will say, well, I don't want to put a picture up because they're going to know how old I am. And I tell them that if you don't have a picture up, they're going to assume that you're doing it for that reason.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Okay, this person says, I'm in my 40s with experience in teaching math, school administration, and creating and delivering customized professional development, both in the public school system and for education management companies who support K-12 schools. I'm looking to take my content background in math and education training experience into corporate America. And I've laid low as far as my job search thus far because I'm finishing up an MBA in management. What is your take on, one, the reality of being able to transfer my skill set to corporate America, and two, is it beneficial to finish the MBA prior to ramping up my job search?
Well, I would say the MBA is definitely going to help. That's statement number one. Number two, I think, again, this goes back to when you're trying to make such a drastic change, you first have to think about, well, what will they be concerned about? Well, they're concerned about, school environment is usually not as competitive. There's certain prejudices about how they think about a school environment. And you want to be sure that you're aware of that and be sure that you have something to say about that. If you've been in education and you have a, so while you say you focus on math, at the end of the day, you've been a teacher. So I'm not sure where you want your entry point to be, but for a corporation, the most logical place to use you would be in their learning and development group. And it wouldn't be out of the question to think that they might need somebody who's good at math, because we know that with calculators, et cetera, a lot of people aren't as good with math as they used to be, so they might even have a course to, bring people up to speed. But you have to think about, where have I been? I've been in an education environment. Where does that correlate in corporate America in learning and development? And then what will their concerns be, and how can I allay those concerns? And I can tell you that the MBA will certainly at least have you be able to give the argument that you have made the effort to understand how business operates and the intricacies of that. So, Dave, I don't know, do you see anything different?
No, I really don't. I don't think it makes a heck of a lot of difference, frankly, whether you've graduated and gotten your MBA or are well on your way to it in terms of when you want to get into it. I think that just the mere fact that is something you're doing, will certainly have that's a plus, not a minus, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Pat, we're rapidly heading toward the top of the hour here, and so I wondered, before we close up things here today, whether or not, based on what you've heard today or anything else, any closing comments you'd like to share with the group.
Sure, thank you. It's Dave and I have been doing this, I don't know, maybe a couple years, and the questions are always very similar. We always know we're going to hear the question on age, and so you're not alone. It's very common. I think if you take nothing else away from these discussions, the advice that Dave has mentioned and I've alluded to by pointing you in certain directions about research and understanding. A lot of people do research to understand, what product do they make, and they study the web page, et cetera. But there's so many ways now to go and understand their competitive landscape. If it's a private company, go find a public company and look at their SEC filings and see, because in those SEC filings there's always a statement about the industry and the nature of the industry. There's great information so that you go in prepared to prove to them that you understand the problems that they face, both generally, that is in the competitive environment, and specifically because you've done your digging and your homework, and talking to people inside the company, not just because they know somebody, but because they know something and can help you understand the challenges that the company's facing. That goes such a long way in the interview process. So that's one of the most important pieces here.
Thanks, Pat. I guess my only closing comment would be this, and that is that even though in this day of electronics and the technology and so forth, where it is so easy, deceptively easy, to sit behind a keyboard and send out resumes into cyberspace, and get frustrated by the fact that you don't hear very much, if anything at all, that this is the way to make a the way to make a job change in this day and age. I'm not saying that people don't ever get hired because they responded to an ad. What I am saying is the percentage of that happening, particularly at the levels that we serve here, is a lot lower than you think. And I'm talking maybe 15% of the time would be a high number. Most people make a change through some kind of a linkage process. Call it networking, whatever words you want to put around it. There are a lot of tools, including here, plenty of tools, to help show you how to do that if it's a career issue that you are focused on as opposed to something else. Is it work? Yes, it's work, but over the years, more than 70% of the members that I talk to who make a change tell me and tell us that is how it happened for them. So that should be a message in terms of where you want to invest your time and your energy in the process of trying to make a transition, and whether that transition is coming because you want to or you have to. that is where I would tell you to emphasize your time.
Agreed. Just one quick last thing. If there's anybody who would like to connect with me, I'm on ExecuNet, have a profile there, as well as LinkedIn, and you see my email address there. I'm happy to connect with you and keep you on my radar.
Great. Thanks again, Pat. Thanks to our audience, and hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dave.